Water, the field of relation, functional orientation. Earth carries existence. Water adds felt registration. It is the field through which reality is met as sensation, desire, preference, and aversion. It governs whether reality can be taken in once presence is established. In the physical world, water takes the shape of its container. When it is adequately held, it can yield without vanishing, carry pressure without rigidity, and transmit force smoothly. Water adapts without losing continuity. Pressure distributes through the whole volume rather than concentrating at one point. When flow remains available, pressure equalizes across what can be reached. When throughput is blocked, pressure concentrates and flow becomes unstable. In lived experience, water begins as sensation. Sensation, emotion, impulse, and desire register conditions before interpretation. This field governs personal closeness, where sensation and relational charge are most immediate. Water does not supply direction or meaning. It determines whether what is felt can remain present long enough to be registered clearly. Permitted specificity belongs to water. Desire and preference help form an internal profile, giving the person a more distinct sense of what brings pleasure, comfort, and fit. When this layer is intact, specificity can register without shame, guilt, or social masking. Water is not only the channel for present feeling, it is also where prior impressions become active again under new conditions. An impression may remain latent until contact activates it. In water, that latent material becomes felt pressure and impulse. As a result, the size of a reaction may not match the size of the current event. A small trigger can release stored history rather than only what is happening now. Core Function 1. Sensation. Water governs whether experience can be met through sensation. At its most basic level, this means the system can stay connected to what it is feeling. Sensation, impulse, emotion, and desire can register without rejection, judgment, or loss of control. This function gives rise to preference and idiosyncrasy. It is the capacity to register attraction and aversion as signal. I like this. I do not like that. These valuation signals arise prior to thought. They do not require justification. A taste, a tone of voice, a kind of room, a kind of person. The signal arrives before any account of why. They are the system's first discriminative read of fit versus non-fit. Sensation also carries stored traces of prior reward and harm. What has felt rewarding before can pull toward repetition, and what has felt harmful before can produce aversion even when the present trigger is small. Preference does not arise only from the present moment. It is shaped by these traces, which continue to bias impulse and preference. When sensation is functional, experience does not force immediate action. Pleasure, discomfort, and emotional tone can be noticed without an immediate need to change them. Feeling remains readable as signal rather than becoming a trigger for reflexive escape or compulsive reaction. A person can notice "I want" or "I do not want" without immediately chasing it, arguing with it, or shutting it down. When sensation becomes strained, it becomes less reliable as signal. In some systems, sensation comes through as too much. Attention narrows around what is being felt, and relief is sought through discharge, stimulation, impulsive contact, or distraction. In other systems, it comes through as too little. Emotion flattens, Pleasure drops, intimacy is avoided, and the person no longer knows clearly what they feel. In both cases, sensation is no longer trusted as signal, but treated as a problem to solve. A common distortion at this level is the rejection of preference itself, when desire or idiosyncrasy is treated as wrong or shameful. It does not disappear. It is pushed out of awareness and returns indirectly as compulsion, control, or numbness. Core Function 2. Containment. Containment specifies whether intensity can be held without urgency. Intensity includes desire, attraction, emotional charge, and the pull toward relationship. When this function is intact, intensity rises and falls without forcing discharge. Wanting does not default to compulsion, and strong feeling does not default to crisis. The system remains proportionate. A message, a tone shift, or a delayed reply can register without immediate confrontation, reassurance seeking, or withdrawal. Containment is the capacity to feel without flooding or freezing. It is not control. It is not suppression. It is coherence under load. When containment holds, a buffer exists between stimulus and response. Discomfort can be present without immediate avoidance. Intensity can be present without immediate release. Feeling remains present long enough to register accurately. This holding is active and load-bearing. When intensity is contained rather than discharged, pressure accumulates and the system adapts. Tolerance increases because charge is carried instead of spent. Pressure becomes usable rather than destabilizing. Thresholds shift and reflexive defense decreases. A common distortion at this level is mistaking intensity for capacity. Dramatic interaction and rapid release can look like aliveness, but they train dependence on discharge as the route to relief. Another distortion is confusing suppression with containment. When experience is pushed out of awareness rather than held, it does not resolve. It remains stored and can later return as disproportionate volatility. When containment is strained, intensity rises faster than it can be held. This often forms around vulnerability, especially where openness has been met with rejection or violation. Closeness then becomes a primary activation site for flooding, control, or freezing. On the agitated side, urgency drives discharge and intensity overwhelms regulation. This can appear as impulsive confrontation, compulsive contact, forced reassurance, or rapid discharge aimed at the other person. On the constrained side, freezing replaces engagement and intensity is shut down rather than regulated. When containment collapses, control attempts to replace regulation, pressure reduction becomes the priority and exchange becomes distorted. In relationships, this can present as possessiveness, dominance, and submission dynamics, or treating the other person as a stabilizing object rather than a separate participant. Core Function 3. Differentiation. Differentiation is water's capacity for closeness without loss of self. It is self-containment expressed through relational limits. It governs a person's availability and access, and through that, how much closeness can be sustained without loss of coherence. It includes recognizing another person's limits as real constraints. Limits are not misread as rejection. They are not overridden to reduce internal discomfort. When differentiation is available, a person can remain near another without merging, collapsing, or pushing them away to stay coherent. Interaction does not require fusion. Distance does not automatically register as abandonment. Exchange occurs between individuals, not as a strategy for state regulation. A person can say yes or no without losing the relationship internally. Another person's boundary can be acknowledged without turning it into a moral judgment or a problem to solve. This function governs the edge between connection and control. When it is intact, neither dominance nor submission is required. The self remains intact in proximity. It does not lean on the other person to stabilize internal state. It does not attempt to crush, manage, or claim the other person to reduce discomfort. A partner running late can register as delay rather than abandonment. A friend's quiet mood can be noticed without turning it into evidence that something is wrong. When differentiation erodes, relationships shift toward power struggle. Connection is used to settle discomfort, so the other person is treated as a regulator rather than met as a separate participant. This presents as possessiveness, coercive pursuit, testing, withdrawal used as leverage, or compliance that hides resentment. Control and collapse are paired errors. One side secures closeness by managing the other. The other side keeps closeness by abandoning self-definition. Differentiation fails when the other person's limits stop being treated as real. Some people dissolve in proximity and shift shape to maintain connection. Others keep distance to preserve coherence, not because care is absent, but because closeness carries too much charge. In the protective direction, suspicion or preemptive rejection can form rigid boundaries that block intimacy before vulnerability is exposed. In both directions, intimacy is used to manage internal state rather than to meet another person as they are. Core Function 4. Permeability. Permeability in water is the capacity to let new experience enter and revise the relationship to existing feeling patterns. When this function is intact, interaction leaves a person altered but stable. Permeability is the capacity to be affected without destabilization. Yesterday's pattern does not have to dictate today's response. An interaction can end without requiring reassurance, withdrawal, or control to feel settled. Influence is permitted without loss of coherence. Permeability is the difference between contact that revises an existing pattern and contact that only reactivates an old one. When permeability is functional, the present moment can be met without defaulting to the old pattern. Learning becomes cumulative rather than repetitive. The past can inform the present without dominating it because new experience can enter and alter the pattern as needed. When permeability is strained, experience does not integrate. The system repeats familiar loops regardless of context. The same reactions, relational dynamics, and desire patterns recur even when circumstances change. The same argument with a new partner, the same stalled arc with a new manager, the same withdrawal pattern in a new friendship. Life can function externally while the underlying pattern does not change. Stored traces continue to bias impulse and interpretation. Under new conditions, they reappear as the same urges, avoidances, and relational scripts rather than becoming learning. Updating also fails when experience is overwhelmed and discharged, or pushed out of awareness and stored. When it is stored rather than integrated, it does not resolve. It remains latent and can later return as disproportionate reaction in response to small triggers. Polarity and Regulation. Water regulates through a primary polarity between reception and integrity. Reception is the capacity to let felt experience enter and register as it arises. Integrity is the capacity to remain coherent while feeling is present without overwhelm, shutdown, or loss of self. This polarity is structural, not moral. It determines whether experience can be received and remain coherent long enough to become usable signal. Reception is not indulgence. Integrity is not suppression. In a functional state, a buffer exists between stimulus and response. Sensation and emotional tone can register without forcing immediate discharge, control, or withdrawal. Capacity increases as a wider felt range can be received without losing coherence. Failure occurs when the system becomes fixed at one pole. Fixation in reception produces overflow. Intensity exceeds capacity, and coherence is overwhelmed, so urgency rises and discharge becomes the fast route to relief. Reassurance is pressed for, resolution is forced. On the other side, fixation in integrity produces rigidity. Feelings become dull rather than regulated, so freezing replaces fluid response. Desire recedes, responsiveness narrows, and interaction is reduced to avoid internal charge. Healthy water is the ability to shift between these poles as conditions change. Water expresses through a set of functional qualities when it is intact, and when it is strained through recognizable patterns of distortion and compensation. These are adaptive responses to capacity limits, not personal failures. The full lists of water's functional qualities, its distortions, and its compensatory patterns are included in the written edition of The Seven Fields, available at the7fields.com. For this audio edition, we stay with the structure of the field itself. Integration note. Water supplies signal. It does not supply direction. It operates within the stability that Earth provides. It reflects experience as felt signal before the functions of other fields respond. Water carries accumulated feeling, not only present input. Accumulation can be immediate and personal. It can also form early in life, before a person can organize experience into narrative or accessible memory. Early accumulation does not define identity. It biases the tone of desire and interaction. Water does not replace earth. Under chronic pressure, receptivity narrows. When the foundation is occupied with survival load, sensation and receptivity reduce until conditions feel stable. Under constant bracing, felt signal is treated as threat rather than usable feedback. Water registers what is present and how much charge it carries. It makes experience inhabitable from the inside, so sensation and relational feeling can function as feedback rather than collapsing into urgency, freezing, or control. When water is bypassed, suppressed, or repeatedly discharged, signal quality degrades. The system shifts toward repetition rather than learning. With water intact, clarity and feeling remains available. Desire, closeness, and interaction can occur without destabilizing the system. The functions of other fields are informed because feeling stays readable as signal rather than being distorted by flooding or freezing. Thinking, planning, and action proceed cleanly because they are not compensating for missing or unreliable felt information. When water is strained, other functions distort. Logic becomes rationalization. Action becomes reaction. Perspective becomes fixed. Integrity at this level means sensation, desire, and relational feeling can be felt and held without bypassing urgency, withdrawal, or control.